everyone, my name is Lily and welcome to my channel. Now, if you've been in the book talk space at all these past 2 weeks, then you already know that there is a recently released dark fantasy book that's currently making its rounds that's called Alchemized by Sen-Lin Yu. Now, every single book talk creator that I know about is currently raving, yelling, screaming, crying about this book right now, and unfortunately, it is that good. However, TikTok is also doing Alchemized wrong right now by the way it's introducing it to its readers. It's being introduced as a Hermione and Draco fanfic. Now, is that totally wrong? Absolutely not. Manacled was is a Draco and Hermione fanfic. Now, Manacled was pulled so that it could be reworked so that it could be traditionally published as its own standalone book, which is what Alchemized is. But when Alchemized started showing up on my feed and it was being described as basically Manacled but published, I was really hesitant and I wasn't even sure if it would make sense to me without the Harry Potter context. So to be completely honest, I almost didn't even pick it up because I didn't grow up on Harry Potter. I didn't ship Draco and Hermione. I've watched the movies, but I've never read the books, so I didn't have the emotional attachment that many of the readers did when they were reading it. But I went and picked it up anyways, and I'm here to tell you that if you've had the same thought process as me, you don't need to read Manacled in order to read Alchemized. Alchemized stands completely on its own, separate from Manacled. Now, Alchemized is not just a love story, which is how it's being introduced to a lot of people. It's a war tragedy about grief, identity, manipulation, faith, survival, and it stands completely on its own. I mean, Alchemized is set in a world that is torn apart by war between alchemists and necromancers, and we have Helena Marino, who is a healer and someone who worked and was part of the resistance, which at this point has fallen. And we begin the story with Helena waking up with absolutely no memory of who she is, how the war ended, or why, or how she's even still alive. And she's being held captive by the High Reeve, who's one of the most powerful necromancers in the New World. He's described as cold, calculating, and we later on learn that he's pretty morally ambiguous, and something about their relationship development makes it really compelling and addicting, and a lot of it comes from the tension and the mistrust and the fragmented memory that Helena has. Now, the High Reeve believes that Helena knows something is buried in her mind, and that something could threaten his control or even reveal the truth about the war's final days. And as Helena starts to piece together her memories, we as readers realize that she may not be as insignificant as she seems or as she may feel that she is. And Alchemized is one of those stories where every chapter deepens the mystery. You're never really sure if Helena is remembering the truth, if her trauma is playing tricks on her, or even if she's being manipulated. And that uncertainty is really what adds the psychological edge to the book. And what's fascinating is that reading Alchemized with absolutely no Manacled or Harry Potter background actually made me experience it as a completely fresh story with no comparisons and no expectations. I had no idea what the book was even about when I picked it up. And so for me, Helena isn't Hermione. She was never Hermione. And Kane, the High Reeve, isn't Draco and was never Draco to me. Their characters are entirely new people. They're shaped by the original world, mythology, and the power system that Sen-Lin Yu created. Now, the writing is so immersive that you never feel like you're missing any context. If anything, when I was reading it, it felt like most of the time I was just stepping into a world that was already set and living and its own thing, which really blew me away. And the setting of Alchemized feels like a mix between dark academia, gothic fantasy, and post-war dystopia. And in order to achieve this, the book constantly described this sort of haunting landscape of like ruined temples and cities and old magic, and a society that's been reorganized under necromantic rule. And even the High Reeves palace or house or mansion feels like a prison and a cathedral. And Senlin Yu uses all these locations that they describe as almost a way of mirroring the book's tone of grief, as being dressed up as order, or even decay being presented as peace. And so the alchemists are able to manipulate life through transformation, like resurrection, medicine, transmutation, while the necromancers manipulate death. So the magic system is also really intricate, and the duality really reflects the entire novel's structure of life and death, memory and forgetting, mercy and even cruelty. And Helena quite literally embodies that contrast as a healer who's trapped in a world that glorifies destruction and cruelty. The world that feels oppressive, but it's incredibly believable because Senlin Yu doesn't over-explain it. They let you feel the weight of its history through the dialogue and the architecture, and so this book just becomes so much more than just a fantasy romance. It truly embodies a war tragedy, and Helena's memory loss functions as a plot device but also as a metaphor for post-war identity. I really saw it as the way that grief can hollow someone out until they no longer recognize who they were before the experience or the trauma. And every time she remembers something, it hurts her, but every time she's unable to remember something, it also hurts her. So it's just such a reflection of how people live and push through a loss, and the sort of internal struggle between wanting to forget and needing to understand what they went through and what happened. And Senlin Yu also explores how religion and belief systems are weaponized to control societies. Now, the necromancer's world runs on rituals and sacrifices and hierarchical purity, so it's both political control and spiritual control. Now, they use that to rewrite morality and to justify their violence. And of course, if you know anything about history, then you know that it really just mirrors real-world history, because we've known that ideologies have been used by divine authority to erase compassion and rewrite their version of the truth over and over and over and over again. And one of my favorite aspects of Alchemized is how it portrays women in war, because they're not just passive victims or fantasy love interests as we've seen many times in other books. They're used as survivors who were both used and discarded by the systems that they were in. So Helena's healing, for example, was once seen as soft or even secondary or grunt work or whatever, but through the novel we start to see the question of how do we know that empathy and memory aren't actually the most dangerous powers of all start to come up. And the idea that compassion is revolutionary feels like a quiet rebellion running through every page. Now, Cain, the High Reeve, believes in control, that meaning can only truly be restored through domination, but Helena believes in healing, and even then she starts to question whether there's truly anything left to heal. And the book touches on the idea of nihilism, but it also resists it. So it insists that memory itself is meaning, that remembering, even when it hurts, is the only act of defiance that they have left. But if you go in expecting a typical fantasy romance where the soft, sweet, kind healer falls for the brooding, morally ambiguous villain and she's able to redeem him through love, that's really not what this book is about. The relationship between Helena and Cain is built on their power imbalance, the tension, and the conflicting moral worlds and ideologies that they both have. And it's really intimate to see how the book is full of unspoken guilt, suppressed tenderness, and even constant fear. And something that I noticed that made the book really addicting to me is that you never really know if Cain can be redeemed, or even if Helena wants to redeem him. So the love story isn't really included in the story to be a cure. If anything, it becomes just another battlefield where both of their ideologies and emotions clash just as much as the war does. And it's just really tragic to see how both characters see pieces of themselves in each other. I mean, the parts that survive the war but no longer really feel human. And Senlin Yu uses a lot of symbolism through mirrors and decay, imagery of hands and healing, and a lot of repetition. And one repeated image is the act of binding, both in the alchemical sense and the emotional sense, where characters are constantly binding things. So like binding wounds or memories or promises and even lies, and it becomes this layered symbol of both protection and imprisonment. And then there's the use of silence. There are entire moments in the book and the chapters where nothing is said between two people or more than two people, and you're still able to feel the tension and the sorrow and the intimacy of two or more people who can't escape each other but also can't be honest about the things that they've done. So, do you need to read Manacled before Alchemized? Absolutely not. In fact, I would even argue that Alchemized works better when it's read on its own terms, because when you strip away the fandom connection, you really start to see just how strong of a storyteller Senlin Yu is. You're able to notice the world building and the potential commentary and the emotional connection that Senlin Yu has built within each character. And the characters become their own person. So the story, although it was a fanfiction, really isn't a fanfiction anymore. It's a reconstruction, almost in the same sort of alchemical sense that we see in the book. Something that was written and then broken down and remade into something entirely new, as we see now with Alchemized. So if you've read Alchemized, I would love to hear your thoughts. Did you read Manacled first, or did you come to it fresh like I did? Did that change the way you were able to connect with Cain and Helena? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know which book I should deep dive into next.